Okay, we can go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for joining. Again, this is John Mead, Product Manager for cnMatrix, and today's topic is about policy-based automation.
Great. Thank you very much, Susie. I appreciate it. Hello, everybody, and welcome. Today I'm going to be talking about Cambium's Ethernet switching portfolio, cnMatrix. I'm going to be focusing on one of our features called policy-based automation that delivers a true zero-touch experience. Okay, a little bit of an agenda. This is what I plan on covering today. So I'm going to do a quick introduction, try to make it quick to the cnMatrix portfolio. I'm sure most of you have seen this already. I'm going to touch on our roadmap and what's coming next over the next 6 months or so. Then I'll start a deep dive into policy-based automation, giving an intro of the feature and the capability. I'm going to go through an example and then give a summary. Then I'm going to transition to Maestro, our cloud-based network management solution, and I'm going to talk about the onboarding and registration process with cnMatrix and how that works with PBA. So I'm going to give a live demo of this, first live demo of this onboarding of cnMatrix, so hopefully it will go smoothly. So here we go. So cnMatrix. This slide here kind of summarizes our long-term vision. We're going after 3 different use cases or 3 different deployment scenarios. One of which is the enterprise indoor access switch, which is already shipping today. It started shipping back in December, so it's been out about 6 months or so. Deployment scenario number 2 is really meant for outdoor video surveillance and smart city type of deployments, and that program is in development as we speak. And then also our WISP deployments. We will be developing switches purpose-built for WISP deployments as well. Of course, all 3 of these switching families will be managed by Cambium's cnMaestro. All right, a little bit of an overview of hardware and software. I apologize if this is a repeat for some of you. On the hardware side, the first question I usually get is, are these switches OEM switches? They are not. Nothing wrong with the OEM model. The OEM model, you can go to China or Taiwan and you can get a switch pretty close to what you're looking for. It comes with hardware, comes with software, ready to go. We did not use that strategy. We designed the hardware ourselves from the ground up, same with the software. The hardware it's a silicon-based solution. It does have a dedicated hardware data plane, which gives us a non-blocking switch for both L2 and L3 switching. It also has a rich set of functionality, L2 and L3, extensive QoS, ACL, and filtering capability. The 4 models that are available today, just the beginning. We have a lot more platforms coming, which I'll talk about later, but the 4 models available today are 2 8-port switches and 2 24-port switches. Now all of these switches also have fiber uplinks. So the 8-port switch, it's actually a 10-port switch, 8 1-gig copper access ports with 2 1-gig fiber uplinks. The 24-port has 4 10-gig fiber uplinks for a total of 28 ports. The 8-port, the reason why there's 2 versions, one with PoE and one without PoE. On the 24-port model, again, one with PoE and one without PoE. On these switches, we also have a USB port for a thumb drive or memory stick, so you can copy files to and from the switches, config files, log files, the actual agent image, and so on. We also have a true out-of-band network management port. If you do use this port, you can get access to the switch even if the main network is down. And of course, we have a standard RJ45 console port as well. Another thing worth mentioning is the fans in these switches. There are no fans in 3 of the switches, very quiet operation. On the 4th switch, that's the 24-port PoE switch. If you're pulling power out of all 24 ports, it does generate a bit of heat, so we have 2 fans in those switches. However, we will be introducing a low power mode. So if you're not drawing a lot of PoE power, we can operate with no fans in that switch as well. So about the software. The software is fully featured. It's a L2 as well as an L3 switch. As an access switch, don't necessarily have to have L3. Some switches out there have L3, some switches do not. We do. I'll talk more about that later. Extensive ACLs, filtering, and QoS support as well. Security, long list of security features. So it's a fully managed switch. For the edge of the network or for the access layer of the network, you can buy switches that are unmanaged, switches that are smart managed. For enterprise deployments, you really do want a switch that is fully managed. So we have a very comprehensive CLI. You can access any feature, any sub-feature with our CLI. We have a web GUI, and also every feature is instrumented with an SNMP MIB, so any SNMP application can help you operate and manage the switch as well. In addition to these management capabilities, we also have a network management solution, which is our cnMaestro solution. cnMaestro is available to run either on-premise or in the cloud. Uplinks. We do have fiber uplinks on our switches. On our 24-port switches, we do have 4 10-gig fiber uplinks. And we like to talk about future-proofing the network. If you don't think you need 10-gig uplinks today, you will very soon. You may very soon. With the cnMatrix solution, you don't have to worry about upgrading your switches a year down the road. With this fully featured cnMatrix solution, you're good to go for many years. So what's next? Intelligent PoE. So we do support PoE on our switches. The 8 and the 24-port models, we support PoE across all ports with a healthy power budget shared across all ports. Complete control of the PoE, enabling, disabling, monitoring, prioritization of the PoE, and automating the PoE capabilities, as I'll talk about later. So many advanced features as well on these switches. I mentioned we do support layer 3. That's not just static routing, it's dynamic routing as well with RIP and OSPF. Automatic device profiling. When devices do connect to the switch, we do gather information about those devices, and we can auto-configure the switch based on policies, which introduces the big feature of today, which is policy-based automation. I won't talk much about it now. I'm going to do a deep dive in just a few slides. So a true zero-touch experience, going to be elaborating on this as well. Zero-touch not only for the initial configuration of the switch, when you initially deploy the switch, but also zero-touch for day-to-day operations of the switch. And that's the magic that the feature PBA can deliver to you. So I'll be diving into that for the rest of today's presentation. So market positioning, where do we expect these switches to be deployed? So for the enterprise switches that we're shipping today, this slide here is a typical deployment, enterprise campus, a 3-tier network architecture. You don't need all 3 tiers. A 2-tier network architecture is also very common. But anyway, starting at the top with the core, you have the core of the network, your core switches, which gives you connectivity to the internet. Your network management solution may be on-premise or it may be out in the cloud. The next layer down is your distribution layer and your distribution switches. And then the final layer, at the edge of your network, that's what I want to talk about. The edge of your network, or the access layer of your network, you have wired as well as wireless connectivity. Here at Cambium, we can provide a very full and comprehensive solution for the access layer of the network. We have the cnPilot access points that we've had for 4-ish years now or so, doing very, very well, very successful. And now we've completed the picture with our wired solution with cnMatrix. And then, of course, up top, I'm highlighting cnMaestro being your network management solution that can run either on-premise or in the cloud. So the highlight of this slide is Cambium delivers cloud-managed access, free cloud-managed access. So we do not charge extra licensing for our cloud management capability. So complete solution at the access layer with cnMatrix and cnPilot, along with cnMaestro for a full management solution. Okay, roadmap, what's coming next? So here we are, midsummer. The software release that's out right now is 2.0.5, and that's available to anyone on the Cambium support site. What's coming next is our first big major software release, 2.1.0. It's going to be available in just a week away or so. A very full content release. It enables the dynamic routing that I talked about. USB port is enabled. Policy-based automation, again, we're building on top of that with lots of enhancements. I'll talk about that later. After our 2.1 release, we have another software release coming out in the end of October timeframe. This is release 2.2. This is a very important release for us. Small little box, but very, very important. This is where we build upon our cnMaestro support. Today with cnMaestro, you can onboard, you can register, you can monitor, you can configure, troubleshooting. From a configuration point of view, today we support config files or templates that can be downloaded from cnMaestro, downloaded to one or all of your switches. In 2.2, we're going to be providing a GUI-based interface via cnMaestro as well. So that will be a big release for us. And then the next big release is 3.0. That's coming out in the January timeframe. And this is where we're going to provide more software capabilities, but more importantly, some new hardware platforms. A 48-port switch, as well as a multi-gig port switch as well. And I'll go into details on those in just a minute. Okay, so for the enterprise SKUs, the enterprise family, I showed you the 4 switches that we're shipping today. On top of those 4 switches, we have 3 or 4 additional switches coming as well. On the top of this slide is the 4 switches we're shipping today. On the bottom of the slide are the 3 new SKUs. So starting at the bottom, you see a 48-port SKU. That is a non-PUE 48-port SKU. Again, we have the USB stick, we have the out-of-band port, we have the RJ45 console port, and we also have the 4 10-gig uplink ports. The second switch up, also a 48-port switch, identical, except it also has PUE out capability. A couple aspects of this PUE 48-port switch. We have 2 versions. One that comes with an internal power supply, gives you 400 watts of power, of PUE power budget to be shared across the 48 ports. We have a second version which takes a removable power supply. We're very excited about this option. It gives the customer the choices of different size power supplies, AC supplies, DC supplies, supplies that can go all the way up to 1,000 watts to be shared across the 48 ports. So in summary, this 48-port PUE version, anywhere from 400 watts of power budget all the way up to 1,000 watts of power budget. Okay, the third switch up in this picture is our multi-gig switch. This switch supports the 802.3 BZ standard. So it's a hybrid switch. Starting from left to right, you see 8 ports. Those are 8 ports of 1 gig copper. In the middle there, you have 6 ports, which are the new 802.3 BZ capable ports. So these ports can go up to 2.5 gig of bandwidth on each port. One of the main drivers for this at Cambium is our new 802.11ax access points that are coming out that will be able to go. The 11ax standard absolutely enables above 1 gig of bandwidth being needed. Another interesting aspect about these 6 ports is the PUE capability on these ports. We do support the BT standard up to 60 watts per port. And then moving over, we do have 2 fiber ports on this box, 2 SFP plus or 2 10 gig fiber ports. So that's what's coming on our enterprise switching portfolio. So in the January timeframe, we'll be coming out with these new models. So very feature-rich and comprehensive portfolio for the enterprise space. So I'm going to do a deep dive here on policy-based automation now, the feature that I've been talking about. It delivers a true zero-touch experience. So zero touch. I keep talking about zero touch, and everyone in the industry uses this term zero touch. But what does it really mean? It means that the switch needs configuration, and how do you automate that configuration? So most people talk about the configuration that's needed at the initial deployment of the switch. So when you first deploy that switch, there are some basic configurations that need to take place. It's on a case-by-case basis. I have some examples here. You might want to configure some static VLANs, uplink ports, in-link aggregation. If you don't use DHCP, maybe statically configured IP addresses, static routes, and so on. So at Cambium, the way we solve this, the way we automatically configure this is through cnMaestro. With cnMaestro, during the onboarding and registration process, it downloads an initial config file that can be used to do all of this configuration automatically. So delivering a zero-touch solution for you. Now this is where most people stop the discussion of zero-touch. However, I think there's a second component of zero-touch, maybe even more important, and that's the configuration that's required on the switch for day-to-day operations of the switch. So a few examples. As you connect new devices to your switch, any type of device, it can be an access point, a video surveillance camera, a printer, or any one of 1,000 different IoT devices. So when you plug in these devices into the switch, there is configuration on the switch needed. What VLANs do you want that device to have access to? What are some of the security settings? What are some of the QoS settings? So that configuration that is necessary when you connect these devices, the question is, how do you automate that configuration to deliver a zero-touch experience for your day-to-day operations? And the answer to that question at Cambium is this feature that we call policy-based automation. Now, the configuration when you connect in these devices, equally important is when you remove those devices, the cleanup of that configuration. So when you remove a device, you really do want to remove the associated configuration for two reasons. One, from a security point of view, you don't want to leave VLANs open on a port. And two, just from a maintenance of your config file. You don't want your config file to grow unwieldily, grow out of hand. So it helps you maintain that config file, keep it concise and clear and simple. Now, connecting devices, removing devices, that equates to moving devices as well. If you disconnect a device from one port, add it to another port, automates that as well, or disconnecting the device from one port on one switch and adding that into another, to a different port on a different switch, handles that as well. So let me dive into the policy-based automation feature a bit here. It consists of user-created policies that will automate the switch and port configuration. So these policies can be created via any management interface that I've talked about. So you can create this policy using CLI. You can create the policy using our web GUI. You can also create this policy with an SNMP app, or what we recommend is cnMaestro. If you create this policy with cnMaestro, cnMaestro will then push that policy down to not just one switch, but every switch in your network, whether it be 1, 10, or 100. It will push that policy down to all switches. So now, if you have a policy for access points, let's say, you can plug an access point into any port of any switch, and that switch and that port will be automatically configured. Okay, so these policies have two components. The first component is the match criteria. And what we support today, and with our new 2.1 release, we support the match being based on any aspect or any part of the LLDP information that's received, as well as using the MAC address. So for MAC information, we can use an exact match to a MAC address, we can use a MAC address range, or we can use an OUI. The second component of these policies are the actions that are performed once a match has happened. So if there's a match, let's say using access points as an example again, if you have a policy for access points and you've matched an access point, the actions can be one of many actions. You may want some or all of these actions. You can configure VLANs on the switch, the port where the device was connected will become members of those VLANs. The uplink port, so the traffic can flow through the switch appropriately. Those uplink ports are also become members of the VLANs. There's QoS settings that you can do. You can do ACLs, security settings, the PUE priority of a port. You can change that, low, high, or critical. And port labeling, I think a very, very useful feature. It's very common in these port tables with tons of information to label the port. So when you view these port tables, you know what that port is. Is it connected to a printer? Is it connected to the access point? It's very, very common on switches today to be able to label these ports. With PBA, with this feature, it will automatically label the port. You plug in an access point, matches a policy, automatically will label that port. We have a few different options available for how to label those ports. So this configuration that is a result of these policies, that configuration is considered dynamic. So when you remove that device from the switch, the configuration that is associated with that device will automatically be cleaned up. Now, the different events that cause that configuration to be cleaned up, things such as link down, or if you disconnect the device, or if the match criteria is no longer valid, something has changed in the LLDP information, or from a management interface point of view, if you disable the policy, again, that configuration is removed. Okay, so here's a quick example. I keep talking about access point. So let's say you're connecting an access point into your network, and that access point is associated with 3 SSIDs. So let's say you have a guest SSID, a contractor SSID, and an employee SSID. Those 3, in my example here, those 3 SSIDs will be tied to VLANs 40, VLANs 50, and VLAN 60. Let's say you want the PBID to be VLAN 40. And in my example here, we're going to connect the access point into port 5. So without this policy-based automation feature, there's a lot of ways to configure the switch. You can configure it using the GUI or the COI. And what I have here, these are the COI commands required to manually configure the switch. It's 10 to 15 commands. They're not hard commands. Easy to make a mistake, though. Very error-prone to fat finger it. A very, very common problem in the network to troubleshoot. Anyway, these are the commands you type in. With PBA, you don't have to configure any of these commands. You just have to create the one policy. This is how you would create that policy with a COI command. So, summarizing the policy-based automation feature, what does it really do? It automates your adds, moves, and changes, simplifying deploying your network and maintaining your network. This is a big one. It eliminates the error-prone manual configuration. Error-prone and very time-consuming. So adding a new device or moving a device, it really simplifies and reduces the troubleshooting associated with that. So every port is treated equally. You don't have to pre-configure, ports 1 through 4 for access points and pre-configure ports 5 through 8 for video surveillance cameras or whatever. Those days are gone. So every port is treated equally. With these policies, you plug any device into any port, and the switch is automatically configured. It enhances security by auto-segmenting devices. You plug a device in, we do a profile match on that device, and we automatically segment that into the correct subnet or VLAN. So little or no IT is needed for deploying these new devices. It really is plug and play. Plug in the device, you walk away, you're done. This frees up the IT team to do more important tasks. Overall, reduces expenses required to deploy and manage your switch. Okay, so now I'm going to transition to something a little different. So I'm going to talk about cnMaestro. cnMaestro is our cloud-based or on-premise-based network management solution. I'm going to talk about the onboarding process, how you onboard your switch for the first time, and how do you tie PBA into that onboarding process. So a little bit about this demo. Let me give you a quick walkthrough before I start the demo. So this is about Cambium's cloud managed access. So we provide a complete solution for the access layer. We have cnMatrix for the wired switching, we have cnPilot for the Wi-Fi, for the wireless, and then we have cnMaestro to manage it all. So in my demo today, I have cnMaestro running in the cloud. I have one cnMatrix switch, it's an EX2010, and I have two Wi-Fi access points. So this demo is meant to start with a defaulted switch. So I have a switch here, and I am going to default that switch as we speak here. So I'm bringing up a console port. You don't normally need a console port. This is only for demo purposes. So, but just to put it in the defaulted state, I'm going to type in the command boot default, hit Y to acknowledge, and our switch is now booting. So it takes a minute or so to boot up. I'm going to go back to the presentation. So I'm booting up this defaulted switch, powering up this defaulted switch, and I'll get to that in a minute. Going back to the presentation, if I can get back there. Sorry. Okay. So Cambium's cloud managed access, cnMaestro, cnMatrix, cnPilot. A true zero-touch experience is what I'm going to show today. So this zero-touch experience, it's not just for the initial deployment of the switch, it also covers the day-to-day operation of the switch. So as an example, in today's demo, I'm going to connect in these two access points, and all I have to do is physically plug in the connections. No need to do any configuration of the switch at all. Three simple steps. So the first step is to create the configuration file. So this is a template used by cnMaestro that can be downloaded to the switch during the onboarding and registration process. So step one is you create your config file. Step two is from cnMaestro, there's a operation called claiming your devices. So when you purchase your Cambium devices, you'll get a serial number. You don't have to have received the devices, and that's an important part of this demo. So you purchase your Cambium equipment, you receive the serial numbers, and you can use those serial numbers to claim the device, which includes claiming the device, includes downloading new software to the device if you want, setting your location, and for today's demo, you can also download a template file as well, which I'm going to show you. So two steps. The third step is to actually power up your switch and connect it to the network. And you're done. That's the final step in this process. So you're truly finished. So you create a config file, you claim the device, and then the next step is to plug in the actual device. So let's go through those three steps in more detail. So creating a configuration file. I've created a config file ahead of time. This config file can be as small as you want with a few commands or as large as you want, depending on your needs of the network. Could be a small, simple network, could be a very large and complex network. In my example, my template file is called John's Demo. And I'm a very simple config file. I'm going to create VLAN 10, and I'm going to make all ports a member of VLAN 10, a static configuration. But in that template, I'm also going to create a policy, a PBA policy, policy-based automation. And this policy is going to be for Cambium Wi-Fi access points. I'll talk more about what that policy handles in a minute. Step two, claiming your device. So you open up your cnMaestro account, you claim the devices of your purchased Cambium equipment. And again, you don't have to have received your equipment yet. You can do all this in advance. So if you're a managed service provider, you can do all this remotely ahead of time. When it comes time to deploying the devices, you just simply plug it in and you're done. So anyway, when you claim your device, you also select the configuration template and then approve it, and you're good to go. Step three. So you connect the devices to the network in step three. So when ready, so it could be days, weeks, or months after you have claimed your devices. So the first step is to power on the switch. So I've done that already. The switch is powered on. The next step is to connect the switch to the network. So this is a completely defaulted switch, and I'm plugging it in right now as we speak. I just plugged it into the network. I'm using port 8 as my uplink port. So the switch is fully defaulted. I have not pre-configured it. It's in a full default state. I typed a boot default command a couple minutes ago. So the next step would be to connect any devices that you wish into your switch. My example was 2 access points. The switches will then be, the switch or switches, depending how many switches you have in your network, will be auto-discovered and auto-configured. As devices that are covered by any policies you may have are added, the switch will then be auto-configured based on those policies. All right, so a little bit about the cnMaestro configuration template that I set up. This is for demo purposes. So I've done a few things. The first step is I got a couple commands in my config file here to create VLAN 10, and I've made ports 1 through 8 a member of VLAN 10. Not port 9, not port 10. The next step is from this PBA point of view, I've set it up so that ports will be automatically labeled with the sysname that is found in the LLDP packet. The next step is I'm going to create a rule. This is the match criteria for the policy. My rule is going to be based on, my comment here says LLDP, but I've changed that. It's going to be based on the MAC OUI. So on a Cambium MAC OUI, I will detect that it's a Cambium cnPilot AP. The action that I've created, I have a few items in my action. I'm creating VLANs 20, 30, and 40. So whatever port we plug the AP into will be made a member of VLANs 20, 30, and 40. The second item of the action is I'm going to change the PUE port priority from the default value low up to critical, and I'm going to use port 8 as my uplink port. The final step is to create the actual policy, which just ties the rule and the action together and gives it a name. In this case, it's called Pilot 430. Okay, let's go ahead and go to this demo. I'm going to bring up my cnMaestro account, and here it is. Okay, so this is my cnMaestro account. I'm going to go to the onboarding page, and I have here my switch. It's already onboarded while I was doing the talking. So I'm going to delete that and force it to delete it from my account, and then I'll reconnect it. Here's my switch. I'm going to select the delete option. Yes, delete it from my account. So I'll go back to the onboarding page. And as you can see, I don't have any devices in my account now. I'm going to go to the claim device window, and I'm going to go grab the serial number. Got it there. I'm going to enter it in my claim screen and select the claim devices option. Okay, so you see this switch pop up, and it says it's waiting for the device. Now, I haven't approved it yet. There's a little approve selection there. But before I do that, I'm going to tie a config template to this. And here's the template file. There's many that I've created here. The template file that I've selected here is the one at the bottom called John's Demo, cnMatrix John's Demo. I'm going to save that. Okay, now I'm going to approve it. So once I approve it, the switch is going to reach out to, well, what the switch does when I first connect it to the network is it does a DHCP, it gets its IP address, it gets the IP address of the DNS server, it gets the gateway information, the SNTP information, and if you're going to run cnMaestro on-premise, it will also use options 43 and 15 to derive the IP address of the on-prem cnMaestro. So anyway, I'm going to click approve here, and it will take a little bit, and it's going to start the onboarding process. So the switch is discovered by cnMaestro. cnMaestro is now downloading the template file, and it should be complete here in another 10 or 15 seconds. Hopefully you guys can see my screen okay. Okay, so now the switch has been onboarded, so my cnMaestro account now knows about this device, cnMatrix, that I've onboarded. I'm going to go to the monitoring screen, and we see that I have one device in my network. This is the cnMatrix switch. Now, if I go over to this dashboard, gives you a quick glimpse of what's happening on the switch. You can see these different ports. Port 8 is green. That's my port that is connected up to the uplink. On port 1, I'm going to hover over that. It shows me some useful information. About halfway down this pop-up window, you can see that this port is a member of VLAN 10 and VLAN 1. 1 is the default VLAN. But in my template, I created VLAN 10. I made ports 1 through 8 a member of it. So I'm hovering over port 1, and it is a member of VLAN 10. Another thing worth pointing out, a few lines down from that, is the PUE port priority. And you can see that it's at the default value of low. Now, if I look at port 2, it's the same thing, member of VLAN 10 and 1. If I go over to port 9, you can see it's a member of only VLAN 1, because in our template, we only made ports 1 through 8 a member of VLAN 10. So now if I hover over port 8, you can see it's up, it's enabled. It's also a member of VLANs 10 and VLAN 1 as well. The PUE port priority is at its default state of low. So what I'm going to do now, the next step, either today or tomorrow or whatever, in the time of the network administrator as he deploys his devices, I'm going to plug in the cnPilot access point into ports 1 and port 2. So after plugging in these cnPilot devices, the policy that we configured should kick into gear. It should detect these devices and auto-configure the switch and the port as we configured. So let me hit the refresh button here on cnMaestro. Let's see here. Okay, so after hitting the refresh button, you see that ports 1 and port 2 are now green. That means they're up. So if I hover over the port, we'll see what happens. So if you go about halfway down, it lists the VLANs. So you can see that the policy did kick into gear. I didn't do any manual configuration. This happened automatically. So this port, it was a member of VLAN 10 and VLAN 1, but now it's also a member of VLANs 20, 30, and 40 because of the policy. And that all happened automatically. The second thing that I wanted to demo is this PUE port priority. Before it was low, it automatically was changed to critical. Now if I go to port 2 and hover over port 2, that's where I plugged in the second cnPilot. So you can plug in one access point. I could plug in 4, 5, 6, 7 access points into the switch, and the policy would kick into gear on all ports. So here we are on port 2. Again, port 2 is automatically made a member of VLANs 20, 30, and 40. The PUE port priority was again changed from low to critical. Now, one more interesting point, I'm going to move to port 8. Port 8 is also, since it's the uplink port, if you want the traffic to flow through the switch correctly, port 8, the uplink port, it could be a trunk, a link aggregation. That also has to be a member of these VLANs as well. So you can see here halfway down, port 8 is also a member of VLANs 20, 30, and 40. That all happened automatically. So the policy is doing as we expected. So second part of this demo for PBA is to show what happens when you remove a device. So I'm going to unplug my access point from port 1. So I just unplugged it. So I still have my access point into port 2. I'm going to hit the refresh button on cnMaestro. Okay, so now you see port 1 got updated. It's now red, meaning I disconnected the device. So I'm hovering over port 1. I have my mouse hovering over port 1. And you can see that the VLANs went back to being a member of only VLAN 10 and VLAN 1. It is no longer a member of ports 20, 30, and 40. Also, the PoE power port priority got changed from critical back to the original static state or default state of low. Okay, I'm going to unplug port 2 now and demonstrate the exact same thing. So I'm going to hit the refresh button on cnMaestro. And port 2 turned red. Again, I'm going to hover over it. Again, the VLANs, all the configuration that was associated with the policy, so the dynamic configuration, automatically removed, automatically cleaned up. Now, I'm going to plug these access points back in, but I'm going to plug it into different ports. I'm going to plug one into port 1, 2, 3, 4, and the other one into port 3. And so now, what I'm demonstrating is you can plug these access points into any port you want. You can remove it from one port, plug it into another port. It will be cleaned up from the original port, and it will be the configuration will then be applied to the new port. So I'm going to hit the refresh button on cnMaestro, and now you can see that the two access points, I just plugged them into ports 3 and 4. You see that ports 3 and 4 are green. If I hover over them, again, the VLANs, they were removed from port 1 and port 2, but now port 3 and port 4 are now a member of VLANs 20, 30, and 40. Moving to port 8, again, members of 20, 30, and 40. So port 4, you can see the PoE power priority has been set to critical, same thing with port 3. So that's the demo, very powerful. Now, the template that I showed today had one basic static configuration, which was creating VLAN 10, making ports 1 through 8 a member of VLAN 10, and I had one policy configured. But you can create as many policies as you want. Let's say you want a policy for printers. You want a policy for video surveillance cameras. You want a policy for any other type of device that you're going to be connecting, moving, modifying, so on and so forth on your switches. You create those policies, whether it be one policy or 10 policies or more, as many as you want. And so you download that template file at your onboarding or registration time, and you're good to go. You just plug and play, making it a very easy and simple deployment scenario. So that kind of wraps up the demo. Let me go back. I think I have one more conclusion slide for you. Let's see if I can get back here. Okay, so kind of a summary of cnMatrix, just an overall summary of the portfolio. So cnMatrix, enterprise grade, layer 2 and layer 3 functionality, cloud management with cnMaestro, ease of use. So easy to deploy, easy to maintain, easy to troubleshoot. This ease of use or the zero-touch provisioning that I showed today, not just for the initial deployment of the switch, but for ongoing operations of the switch as you connect devices and remove devices with the policy-based automation feature. Enhance the security, with the device profiling that comes with PBA and the auto segmentation, a significant help. The overall cloud-managed access from Cambium gives you the complete access layers, cnMatrix, cnPilot, and cnMaestro. Also, haven't mentioned it yet, but we do support a limited lifetime warranty, 5 years. Cambium is known for having best-in-class support. Adding all of this up, it really does give you a best-in-class total cost of ownership. All the features I talked about today, whether it be the 10 gig fiber uplinks or the L3 functionality or the advanced features like PBA, cloud management, the 5-year warranty, everything I've mentioned today, there is no extra licensing. Everything comes with the base price of the switch. So that summarizes, that's the end of the presentation for today. Thank you very much for attending. I can open it up for Q&A. Susie, not sure how you want to do the Q&A here.
I don't see any yet, but I could read them to you if we get any in.
Okay. No problem. I'm going to stop sharing. Oh, okay, I can see the Q&A window. So there's a bit of an echo that someone reported early on. I hope that was it got better during the presentation. Thank you, Vitaly, for joining. Appreciate it. Yeah, good point, Vitaly. We do want to work on more configuration examples. So overall, we're really excited about this cloud managed access, this total complete solution we have from Cambium. More configuration guides and examples like what we went through today. I think that's a really good suggestion. Okay, so if there's no questions today, no problem at all. If you have any questions after we hang up, please reach out to your local Cambium contact, and I would be happy to get on a call and go into as much depth as you would like.
Thanks, John. And the recording and your slides will be posted to YouTube and our community forum in case there's any questions that people can ask there too. Okay, thanks for your time today, John. Thank you, everybody.
Great. Thanks again. Thank you, Susie. Appreciate it.
Yep, have a good day.
Bye-bye.